I'm just looking at the game and drinking a 40. Next thing I know, he pulls out a gun and pointed it at me. And then he made everybody lay on the ground. And then the next thing you know, he shot her in the head. And then he shot me in the face. You probably can see the little scar right there. And then he just started shooting everybody. At this point, I'm laying this way or away from him so he can't see my face. And I held my breath and I laid still and acted like I was dead. And then he shot me 2 more times in the back. When I heard him leave, I got up and I started running. And as I'm running, he's shooting at me some more. And then he shot me and hit me in the butt.
Welcome to the free sermon podcast of the Potter's House Church in Virginia Beach, affiliated with Christian Fellowship Ministries. Our vision is winning souls, making disciples, and planting churches. It's Tuesday, where you're going to hear a powerful testimony of God's grace revealed in human lives. Each Tuesday, you'll hear Pastor Adam interviewing pastors from around the world to share the mighty miracles that God has done in their lives to give you hope for yours. We share the stories of the men behind the messages you hear every other day on this podcast. Keep in mind that the free version only includes a portion of the whole testimony interview. To listen to the full version, use the links in the show notes to subscribe via Apple Podcasts or supercast.tech. Every dollar goes to supporting world evangelism. Enjoy today's Testimony Tuesday.
All right, and welcome back to the VBPH Sermon Podcast. This is Pastor Adam on Testimony Tuesday, and we are very, very excited to have a guest that until a few days ago I didn't know, but was introduced by a mutual friend, Evangelist Jeremiah Wacker, who is continuing to go around the fellowship and spread the word about the sermon podcast and let people know about Testimony Tuesday. So we're grateful to him for providing some introductions. That's always very helpful. And we want to welcome to the podcast today, Pastor Rick Warren. Welcome.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah, it was a welcome invitation from Jeremiah. Yeah, I was excited to be on with you.
Well, that's awesome. We appreciate you spending some time with us today and providing another amazing story of what God has done in your life. And so why don't you give yourself a quick introduction, conference style, the 5-minute version, and tell people where you're located, your wife and your family, and let us know where you're at.
Okay, yeah, I'm Rick Warren, down here in beautiful San Pedro, California. My wife and I, Brittany, my 2 boys, Blake and RJ, we came down at the end of this month. It'll be 1 year ago. We were sent down here to take over a great, thriving church. We took over for Pastor Chris Smart, who's now in Las Vegas, who took over for Pastor William Ortiz, who's now in Bolivia. And we have a great core of people down here, and God is doing some amazing things. We are out of the West Las Vegas congregation with Pastor Lamb. We've been there since 2009, and we're down here. God is on the move, and we're experiencing some great things down here.
Praise God. That's very exciting. Pastor Scott Lamb is one of my favorites across the whole fellowship.
Mine too.
So you are very blessed with a good pastor.
Yeah. And you know what? And a lot of people, I've heard that a lot of people take their pastor for granted, but I never have. It's always in awe of the revelation that he has and what God does in and through his life. It's every time he gets up behind the pulpit, it's like,
I think for most of us, man, he's on another level.
yeah. And you know, it's a blessing and a curse, and it's a blessing, obvious, you know what the blessing is, but the curse is being his disciple. I want to try to live up to that. And he's got 45 years under his belt, and I got 1 year under my belt, and so I'm trying to live up to what he's discipled me with. I want to come up there and bring the heat the way he does, but it's not there yet. But I'm getting there.
Yeah, man, you just can't replace 45 years of experience. But amen, God can help us anyway.
Yeah. Amen.
So, Pastor Warren, even though you're not from the Purpose Driven Church, we'd love to hear more about you, and like how you grew up. Where are you from?
Yeah, that's funny about that. When I introduce myself to people, I got a lot of explaining to do. I tell them I'm from the Potter's House, and they're like, "Oh, TD Jakes." No,
Right.
no, not TD Jakes. And I tell them my name is Rick Warren. Oh, you wrote the book? No, not that guy either. And so they're all.
I would just take it, man. Yeah. Did you like it?
Yeah, right. I was thinking about putting that on my flyers from now on. Coming
Right.
here, Pastor Rick Warren.
You might not get invited anywhere in our fellowship.
No, but so I grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana, and born and raised there. Lived in the same house. My mom and dad bought our house in 1978, and so she's still there. My mom's still there, so we grew up in that house, our whole life. Mom and dad, I got a brother that's a year and a half younger than me, almost 2 years younger than me. Stable house, we like I said, been in the same place, 42 years and 44 years, whatever it is. And it was always stability. My dad worked the same job my whole life. But we never, there was never any talk of God, religion, any form of that ever my whole life. I never remember having any of those type of conversations with my parents at all, my grandparents, my uncles, nobody, and all we did was play sports. Sports was our religion, I guess you can say. And so we were always playing. We played baseball, basketball, football, track. I ran track. We bowled on Saturday and Sunday mornings. My dad played softball in the softball league on Sundays. They were at every event. They went to every, I was in school plays and, different things. And they were always there. They were always around and supported us on that. But my dad was not really a big communicator. He never really communicated with us anything, other than don't do this, don't do that, or you're going to get a whooping. Never explained the consequences or the, ramifications of our actions. Just don't do it, and so, he was kind of heavy handed at times. He had short temper. So we were always on eggshells around him. But like I said, there was no religion at all. I don't even remember ever seeing a Bible in my house or anything. Actually, the first time I ever seen my mom in church, I was 40, and it's when my wife and I's oldest son was born, and my mom came out here to visit us in Vegas, actually, and she went to church with us. First time I ever seen my mom in church, 40 years old, so no form of God at all. When I turned 17, I graduated from high school. I hit the streets. Well, let me backtrack a little bit. So I had an uncle who was about 10 years older than me, and another one that was maybe 11 or 12 years older than me. And they enjoyed seeing my brother and I, well, especially me, they enjoyed seeing me drunk at a young age. And so, they would have their parties and stuff, and they would give me drinks, and I'd, be at the party. My mom.
You said a young age. What age are we talking
about?
I
mean, like young, like 5, 6, and they would just sneak me little drinks because I guess, I would be acting wild and crazy when I was,
You're the entertaining drunk, huh?
Yeah. And that continued into my adult life, but I'll get to that. But yeah, so I developed a taste for alcohol at a young age, and like I said, my mom and dad played, my dad played softball, so they always had, parties, and we would sneak beers out of the coolers, when we were kids. And, but yeah, so my uncle, he was the guy, he he partied, he traveled, he always had the girls. And so, he lived life on the edge in the fast lane. My dad, like I said, he worked 9 to 5, went to work, came home, and sat in his chair and drank beers and watched TV. He was a great dad. Don't get me wrong, but that was his life. And my uncle, who was a few years older than me, he would take us to amusement parks and do things. And so he became the one who I wanted to model my life after. And so I'm like, when I got old, I wanted to be him. I wanted to be the traveling and partying, and I wanted to be that guy. And so I followed that, and I hit the streets when I turned 17, and 18, I got myself into some trouble, breaking in. I got arrested for breaking in cars in the hospital parking lot. And while I was on 6 months probation from that, my dad got me a job where he worked, and I got caught stealing from there. And that was a whole big mess. And I ended up getting a felony for that. And I got 2 years probation after that. And nothing worse than, your dad working at a place for 20 something years, and everybody knows you since you're a kid. And then they watch you getting hauled off in a police car from
oh man,
from the job, and
sounds like you enjoyed getting the little 5-finger discount.
Yeah, and it's crazy. Every time I've ever been arrested for a crime was for stealing. And I had a problem. They call it a sickness. I had the sickness, I couldn't keep things that didn't belong to me out of my pocket. And so.
Thanks again for listening to the free version of the VBPH Sermon Podcast, where we post sermons on Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays. We also have a premium version of this podcast, which posts sermons and interviews every single day of the week. So why would you want to subscribe? I'm glad you asked. I have 5 reasons for you. Number 1, on the premium version, we post full versions of Testimony Tuesday, Pastor Campbell Thursday, and Study Day Saturday. If you'd like to hear those episodes, then subscribe now. Reason number 2, uninterrupted listening. We remove all ads and all extraneous content from our premium feed. Reason number 3, premium episodes always release 6 hours earlier than the free version. If you're an early bird, it's a great reason to subscribe. Number 4, our subscribers will gain access to our sermon chat group on WhatsApp, where we interact directly with listeners around the globe. If you'd like to chat with other premium subscribers, subscribe today. And finally, every dollar we raise goes to world evangelism. This is the best reason to subscribe, because you are helping us launch churches all around the world. We don't put one dime in our pockets. Everything that we raise from this podcast will go directly to Thursday night of Chandler Conference. So please subscribe today by using the links in the show notes below. Thanks.
So then, lived life, and I moved around. I took a job as a traveling salesman in Detroit. Did that for maybe a couple months, and that wasn't my cup of tea. Then I moved to California. My brother was in the military. I moved out there with him, and I ended up playing basketball at Barstow College there in California. And that didn't go well. I played about 3/4 of a year, and I wanted to party more than I wanted to go to school. And so I just quit, playing. And it was actually halftime of a game. I told the coach, I said, I think I'm done. And turned in my uniform and walked away. Wow. So when I moved to California, I was the type of guy that I wanted to just keep going and going and going and going. I would go to the club, then I would go to the after hours club, then I would go straight to work from there, and I was always on the go. And so I would take these little caffeine pills called No-Dos. I don't know if you remember those.
Oh, yeah.
And so I always had a pack of no-dos in my pocket. So when I went to California in 92, I went to California and somebody introduced me to, they called it crank. And so it's basically just powdered meth and you snort it. But I didn't know what it was. You know, they just said, hey, here's some speed. And I'm thinking speed. Okay. Yeah. No-dos, same thing. And so, you know, I snorted it and, man, I was up for a couple of days and I was like, man, this is it. And so, you know, I did that for a few months. And then, yeah, moved back to Indiana. And then, another friend of mine called me and said, hey, you want to move out of town again? And so I'm going to tell this story, but I'm not going to divulge too many details because you'll understand why when I get to it. But he said, "You want to move out of town?" And I said, "Sure." And so I said, "Give me a couple hours to get my stuff together, and we'll go." And so we moved to this house, and it was like a party house. And so at that point, I was a DJ, and so I had my DJ equipment. I set it up, and we just partied until they evicted us. And my car broke down, and so now I'm nowhere to go, no car, all my stuff. And so a couple weeks prior to that, I had hooked up with a girl, at the club. And so I went to her house and said, hey, can I stay with you? And she was like, sure. And so I'm living there for about a couple months, and it was Sunday night. I'm watching the NBA All-Star game on TV, and a guy comes to the door, and he looked in and he walked away. And I was like, man, who is that? So I went and looked, and the guy came back. So at this point, we're watching. It was me and the girl I lived with, her daughter, she's 4. We're babysitting 4-year-old and a 7-year-old little girl, and her aunt came to pick the kids up. So this guy came looking for her aunt. So she went outside and talked to him. They came back in the house, and while he's in there, I'm just looking at the game and drinking a 40. And next thing I know, he pulls out a gun and pointed it at me and said, here, come over here and lay on the ground. And then he made everybody lay on the ground. And then, the girl, and this was all something that, just I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And so the girl and him were going back and forth. We were probably laying on the ground. We're probably 2 feet apart. And then the next thing you know, he shot her in the head. And then he shot me in the face. You probably can see the little scar right there. Went in here, came out here.
And, oh, my gosh.
And then he just started shooting everybody. And so now, at this point, I'm laying this way, away from him, so he can't see my face. And I held my breath, and I laid still and acted like I was dead. And then he shot me 2 more times in the back. And then when I heard him leave, I got up and I started running. And as I'm running, he's shooting at me some more. And then he shot me and hit me in the butt. And it
oh my gosh,
knocked me down. And and I finally made it to there was a restaurant maybe, I don't know, 150 yards from my house across this field. It was covered with snow. And, I'm running, get shot, get knocked down. I get up. I finally made it to the restaurant. The ambulance came, and they were able to save my life. But the girl I lived with and her aunt and one of the 4-year-olds were murdered, and the other 2 kids were shot multiple times each. And suffered through that, and I had my mouth wired shut for about 6 months. And you would think that would be enough to cause me to slow down, but it didn't.
Wow. So, okay, before you move forward, that's insane. Like, I've never heard somebody go through something like that in their life. So was the guy just on a rampage, or did he have a grudge or something?
Well, he had a grudge against the girl's brother. And so, like I said, it's still, and this was 1993. And so there's still an ongoing thing with this guy proclaiming his innocence. And, there's been, things still going on in the media here and there, and it's, I try to keep myself out of it. They've ask me to do documentaries and give my testimony and stuff. And I always tell them no. I've already lived through that. I've already been through all that, and I'm just trying to move on with my life. And so,
Wow.
Uh,
So how long were you in the hospital after that?
Actually, you know what? I only was in the hospital about 8 days.
That's
Yeah, believe it
incredible.
or
I mean,
not.
you were shot 4 times. Is that right?
Yeah,
Was that right?
Yeah. And so from here to here is actually a bone out of my hip. My jaw was completely shattered right there, and my mouth was wired shut, and then it was cracked here, and so my mouth was wired shut for about 3 months for this to heal, to be stable enough to put the bone graft in, and then it was wired shut about 3 more months after that. So my mouth was wired shut for about 6 months.
Oh man.
Oh, so I missed a part of my life though. I forgot about that part. I don't know how, but when I was 19, I had 3 babies on the way, and so about
Wait,
2
what?
months, yeah, yeah. I told you I was I was out there, man. Just
So
the
3
devil
babies,
was,
meaning from 3 different girls, or you mean you had triplets on the way?
No, 3 different girls. Yeah.
Oh
So,
my gosh.
yeah. So when I was 20, in about 2 months, my first daughter was born. And then about 6 weeks later, my 2 sons were born 8 days apart. And, all that being said, you would think that would be enough to make me want to slow down, but it didn't. And so I continued to live a reckless life, just doing the most, just everything. And so I'm a barber, right? And so I got my barber's license after I got shot in 1994. About 1994, I got my barber's license. I've been cutting hair since then. I still do that, 4 days a week at a shop here in California. And
The hair is always growing, right?
yeah, that's right. And and so I'll get to that part too, but and so I had a shop in Indianapolis, and I had a good thing going. I was making a boatload of money, but I was still under demonic influence, and that money that I was making at the shop just wasn't enough, and I needed more money, right? And so I just was doing extra stuff that I shouldn't have been doing. I kind of got caught up in a little bit of trouble, and so I sold my shop quickly, and then I moved to Philadelphia. And so I lived there for almost about a year. But I went there, I didn't know anybody. I didn't know anything about the city. I didn't have a job. I didn't have a place to live. I didn't have nothing lined up. I just had to get away. And I wanted to go somewhere where nobody knew me, and and I could start fresh, and so I was in Indianapolis, like I said, and I ended up having another daughter. I was married, and I messed that up. So I was never a good dad, during that time of my life. It was all about me. That's the only thing that mattered to me, was me, satisfying the flesh, no regard for anything. And so when I moved to Philadelphia, I messed up my marriage, I messed up my business, and I was a terrible father, right? So I said, I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to start over. I'm not going to open another barbershop. I'm not going to get married again. And I'm not going to have any more kids. And then from Philadelphia, I moved to Las Vegas. And within 3 months, the opportunity for me to buy another barbershop just dropped into my lap. Offer I couldn't refuse. I mean, it wasn't my plan, but it just worked out that way. And so from that shop is where I ended up meeting my wife, and I met Larry Shomo, who's a pastor down in Hewitt, Texas now, and they're down there having revival. By the way, they're doing great. And I met him, and he invited me to church, and so, the three things that I said I was never going to do. I said I was never going to have another shop. I was never going to get married again, and I was never going to have any more kids, because I squandered them away, being stupid. But God had a different plan for my life, and he restored all those things. And instead of now being for my glory, it's all for his glory.
You've reached the end of the preview of this Testimony Tuesday episode. If you want to hear the second half of this interview, please use the links in the show notes to subscribe. You'll get daily sermons, full testimonies, and an interruption-free listening experience. And every dollar goes to world evangelism. Thanks for listening to this episode of Testimony Tuesday on the VBPH Sermon Podcast.
Thank you so much for listening to the Sermon Podcast of the Virginia Beach Potter's House Church. Were you blessed by today's message? Let us know. Please leave us a rating on Apple Podcast or on Podchaser. We'll be back next time with another life-changing word from heaven. God bless.